It was just before 11 p.m. when the housekeeper keyed open the glass-fronted mansion and stopped in the doorway. On the marble by the living room rug, a 52-year-old man lay face down. A 30-year-old woman was a few feet away, motionless beside an overturned side table. No pry marks, no broken locks. The alarm had been disarmed from inside. Patrol arrived at 11:17. Paramedics called both victims deceased. Valuables sat where they always did. On the kitchen island, 2 wine glasses, one carrying a thin lipstick ridge, stood beside a half-cut lemon gone dull at the edges. A steak knife rested in the drying rack, recently washed. A chef's knife remained untouched on the magnetic strip. A study looked staged for tomorrow. A signed deed, escrow confirmations, and draft deal terms stacked on a credenza. A second phone with no case lay locked on the coffee table. The primary phone, in a worn leather case, had stopped sharing location at 1958. The house's cameras told a quieter story. Between 2042 and 2151, the archive contained a single continuous gap. The storage array logged a sudden capacity drop at 2153 and a soft reboot. Motion sensors, separate from video, still recorded passes in the rear hall at 2047 and 2103. Water and power lined up with those times. The guest half bath showed a 4-minute spike from 2102 to 2106. The pool pump cycle at 2130 created white noise across the yard, overlapping the deletion window. At 2114, the smart home clock jumped forward 1 hour, then rolled back 90 seconds later. Perimeter data stayed clean. The enclave gate saw no unfamiliar plates after 2000. A rideshare drop was logged on the public road at 2026. A single silhouette crossed the sidewalk toward the service path 5 minutes later, partially masked by a hedge and 2 dead street lamps. The dinner receipt on the dining console was time-stamped 1932, 2 entrees, a shared dessert, plating requested. Earlier that day, the housekeeper had received a brief call from a blocked number asking her to start earlier than usual in the morning. The phrasing was off, even if the cadence sounded right. In her handbag, a folded clinic reminder set a prenatal consult for the following week. Pharmacy slips matched a vitamin regimen consistent with early pregnancy. That single detail would redraw the motif map before sunrise. From the threshold inward, nothing looked ransacked. The house read like a ledger. Timestamps, toggles, receipts, residue. No staged exit, no dramatic entry. Just choices recorded by devices that do not argue, and a room that kept the order of things when people tried to change it. He grew up inside expectations. His father sat on boards, moved capital between ports and parcels, and measured success in quarters, not years. Introductions did the work of resumes. By 18, his trajectory looked fixed. Western education, Eastern inheritance, continuity without argument. Records place him in the United States by the late 1990s. Business school, internships, case competitions. He learned to speak in margins and multiples. Graduation was followed by a return flight to Dubai and an immediate seat at the family table. Projects and infrastructure, a stake in logistics, minority positions in hospitality. The story read clean. Modernization guided by tradition. Marriage followed as a strategic step. Families aligned. The ceremony formalized more than affection. It stabilized alliances, expanded access, and quieted questions about succession. He complied. The arrangement worked on paper and presented well in public. Charity galas, ribbon cuttings, press photos that captured a polished version of proximity. His life divided along air routes. Winters near the Gulf for government-adjacent meetings, shoulder seasons in the U.S. for investor relations, summers wherever a deal required presence. Assistants built itineraries like scaffolding. Nights on planes replaced evenings at home. When plans changed, They changed around him. Distance inside the family accumulated gradually. He missed dinners and arrived for milestones late but bearing boxes. Messages went read more often than replied. Calendar blocks replaced conversations. 2 children grew into adults with reliable access to his public image and limited access to the person behind it. None of this was unusual in his circle. All of it mattered later. Public filings and press suggest he cultivated a recognizable profile. A foundation awarded scholarships. He sat for interviews about bridging markets and responsible growth. The language was careful and consistent. It framed him as a connector between worlds, credible, generous, busy. The American address started as a convenience, proximity to an airport, discreet banking, counsel within a short drive, a place to land between meetings, glass, water, privacy. He told advisors it was a hedge against volatility and a base for U.S. work streams. He told staff to route certain mail there. The House accepted both explanations. He met her during a showing for a client who never closed. She presented comparables and absorption rates without performance. He appreciated the math. A second appointment turned into a discussion about tax treatment and resale windows. A third ended with an offer positioned as too rational to ignore. The wire moved fast. What began as professional contact developed into a pattern that looked domestic from the outside and operational on paper. She coordinated vendors and access codes. Deliveries started arriving on a schedule. He began leaving a suit, then a watch box, then documents that made the desk look used rather than staged. The property shifted from asset to base. His phone behavior changed accordingly. Focus modes engaged in the evenings. Location sharing toggled off more often. Flight notifications remained on. Message previews went silent. To colleagues, he cited jet lag and time zone management. To the system logs, he left a new rhythm. From Dubai, his wife noticed the change through indirect signals. Boutique receipts in a zip code she did not recognize, catering charges for plated service rather than drop-off, dry cleaning with rush fees near the American address, response times that moved from minutes to hours to the following morning. Her own calendar filled with events he used to anchor, family obligations, formal appearances. He attended fewer and left earlier. The pattern did not pivot around an argument, it calcified around logistics. When he was present, he was efficient. When he was absent, he was unreachable. Suspicion did not arrive as a revelation, it settled as routine. Meanwhile, he maintained the public frame. Photo calls, panel seats, posts about education first. The foundation held its annual fundraiser. Press carried quotes that could have been recycled from prior years. If there were fractures, they did not surface on the record. Internally, the American house established its own cadence. Smart home scenes activated on weekday evenings. Vendor codes updated on the predictable rotation. The gate log showed familiar service providers. Nothing flagged as abnormal. The system recorded habit formation without commentary. He raised relocation as a concept, moving her to Dubai when the timing aligns. That proposal lived in spreadsheets and drafts, visa pathways, employer letters, compliance steps. She slowed the process with plausible reasons: existing clients, closing cycles, market seasonality. The conversation parked itself until after the next quarter, which never arrived. Financially, the split life looked healthy. Diversified holdings supported 2 geographies. Travel patterns justified the spend. Advisors saw optimization, not risk. Family saw absence. Staff saw a list of recurring deliveries. Each vantage point told a part of the truth, none of which could be used as protection later. By the quarter before the homicide, the contours were set. He was a man whose biography implied stability and whose schedule produced distance. She was a realtor who managed access with professional ease and personal discretion. The official wife carried the weight of appearances and the arithmetic of suspicion. When investigators eventually pulled the threads, flight records, vendor logs, notification settings, the narrative that once looked like an alibi resolved into what it was, a structure of routine that explained his movements and concealed his life, but could not defend him from the night that followed. Catering arrived first. The guard log at the Enclave gate recorded a vendor entry at 1918 and exit at 1937. The delivery slip left on the dining console was time-stamped 1932. 2 entrees, a shared dessert, plating requested rather than containers. The service notes matched prior private dinners, no staff to remain on site. Inside the smart home network, routine events populated the timeline. At 1920, the evening triggered. Island pendants to 40%, pool LEDs to 60%, ambient audio low. HVAC stepped 2 degrees cooler at 1924. Rear path lighting came on at 1926. Motion sensing, 30-minute cycle. The first hard brake appeared at 1958. The man's phone stopped broadcasting location and disabled Bluetooth beacons, behavior consistent with airplane mode. Push notifications continued to queue. None surfaced on the lock screen. The decision to silence the device preceded everything else. Her phone remained active longer. App telemetry shows routine foreground use up to 2011. Then activity dropped. The device still handshook with the house Wi-Fi for 9 additional minutes, suggesting she was stationary on the property even after she stopped interacting with the screen. Video should have filled the gap. It didn't. Between 2042 and 2151, the CCTV archive showed a contiguous deletion window. The NAS log registered a storage drop at 2153 and a soft reboot, a pattern seen when segments are manually purged and the array remounts. Motion sensors, which log separately from video, still recorded movement in the corridor at 2047 and 2103. The kitchen island carried the scene's simplest markers: 2 wine glasses, but only 1 lipstick ridge. A half-cut lemon on the butcher block had oxidized at the edges, suggesting exposure around the 21-2115 window. A chef's knife remained on its magnetic strip. The smaller steak knife was washed and placed in the rack, film residues visible under oblique light despite detergent. In the study, the paperwork stack was current: a signed deed for the mansion, escrow confirmations for a recent draw, and draft agreements tied to a U.S. project. Handwritten notes referenced valuation friction and a buy-sell trigger, evidence of business tension that would later seem like motive until the timecode stripped it away. Access infrastructure had been touched. The admin panel showed a credential edit earlier that day. A temporary service code was disabled at 1409, and a new subcode labeled Service appeared at 1411. The exterior cameras had their exposure settings adjusted to reduce rear path glare at dusk, an ordinary optimization that, combined with hedges and 2 dead street lamps, left a useful shadow corridor. Perimeter data stayed quiet. The gate recorded no unfamiliar plates after 2000. ALPRs on the public road picked up a rideshare drop at 2026, 50 yards from the service path. Plate unreadable, silhouette visible crossing the sidewalk at 2031. No vehicle entered the driveway. If someone came in, they came on foot. Water and power told their own story. The guest half bath registered a 4-minute spike from 2102 to 2106. The pool pump cycled at 2130, masking ambient noise for several minutes, exactly within the video gap. The smart home hub clock advanced 1 hour at 2114 and rolled back 90 seconds later, an unsuccessful attempt to desynchronize future forensics. Phones set endpoints. His remained mute after 1958. Hers fell silent after 2011. Neither device attempted a 911 call. Neither left the property footprint before the deletions began. Their last digital presence overlapped the window where the cameras went dark. Medical paperwork added a line no one expected. In her handbag sat a folded clinic reminder for a prenatal consult the following week, and pharmacy receipts reflected a vitamin regimen consistent with early pregnancy. The pregnancy was documented, not rumored. For investigators, it redrew the motive map: inheritance, recognition, and the legal future of a child not yet born. Taken together, food plated for two, silenced phones, a targeted video gap, small room cleanup, and a calendar pointing past that night, the day's details did not dramatize. They measured. The house did not argue about what happened. It marked when choices were made and how carefully someone tried to erase them. Detectives started where most cases start: money. The U.S. project had stalled over valuation and revenue timing. Emails between the victim and his stateside partner showed hard language: non-performing tranche, material breach, trigger the buy-sell. A voice memo on the partner's phone captured a line about exiting before quarter close. Motive looked serviceable. A forced buyout could have cost the partner 7 figures. A dead partner could pause or reprice everything. On paper, pressure existed. They pulled the partner's week: calendar, phone, card, car. The first pass placed him in the city through early evening. He left a meeting at 19:05, paid a parking garage at 19:11, and tapped a transit card at 19:19. At 19:47, he retrieved his car from a different garage near the river. Nothing yet contradicted violence. Highway toll cameras refined the path. At 20:26, his license plate pinged northbound, away from the enclave. At 20:54, a second toll registered on the same route, still north. The homicide window at the house opened at 20:42 and extended to 21:51. His car was moving in the opposite direction for most of that time. Bank records added anchors. A chip and pin fuel purchase posted at 21:03 at a station 43 miles from the mansion. The receipt image, pulled from the station system, showed the last 4 of his card and a pump number visible on forecourt video. Forecourt footage timecode matched the receipt within 2 seconds. Phone geodata, less precise but still useful, placed his device on the highway spine the entire hour. Handoffs between towers aligned with the toll pings and the gas stop. Background app telemetry showed a podcast streaming without interruptions. No dark gap appeared that could hide a stop at the property. They checked for a proxy driver. The toll clips showed him alone behind the wheel: build, hairline, glasses. A traffic cam at 2039 captured a distinctive bumper scrape that colleagues later confirmed. The car stayed in motion. It did not detour into the subdivision or any approach road flagged by neighborhood ALPRs. Forensics addressed the possibility of a later contact. Detectives collected the clothing he wore that night and the shoes visible on camera. Luminol and amido black were negative. Trace vacuums pulled road dust, not plant matter, from the mansion's grounds. No microspatter. No transfer fibers consistent with the victim's interior textiles. The digital trail at the house didn't help the theory either. No vendor code tied to him. No geofence hit from his phone or tablet. No rideshare IDs linked to his accounts. The only intersecting artifact was email traffic about the deal, already accounted for in the timeline and tone. They ran the scenario anyway. Could he have hired someone? Payments flagged none of the usual tells. No cash withdrawals, no prepaid cards, no sudden debts to intermediaries. His messages lacked the coded phrasing investigators watch for. If a contractor existed, the evidence for one did not. By day 3, the business conflict theory had structure and no spine. The anger was real. The opportunity was not. The numbers, tolls, pumps, towers, cameras, held under cross-checks. When the lab reported a final no human blood detected on his clothing and the ALPR grid returned clean for his plate near the enclave, detectives set the file aside as a lead explored and exhausted. The case moved on without him. The timeline at the mansion still had a hole from 2042 to 2151. The partner's night did not fit inside it. The shift came from things too small to notice on a first pass. On the underside lip of the kitchen knife drawer, text lifted a partial latent, 3 clear ridge endings and a bifurcation. APHIS didn't hit to a new suspect, it confirmed what the household already recorded. The wife had touched this drawer on a prior visit. Fresh overprint wasn't there. What was new sat on top of the wood. A faint smear of silicone-based glove lubricant mixed with detergent surfactant, recent and incongruent with staff cleaning products. Access told its own story. The admin panel's escutcheon plate carried non-factory scratches around the cylinder face, thin, radial marks consistent with repeated insertion by a key blank that didn't match OEM tolerances. The deadbolt's wear pattern showed a high spot, as if a copy had been used often enough to polish one edge but not long enough to normalize the friction. Deleted video wasn't entirely gone. The NAS preserved index crumbs, time codes without frames. From those, examiners rebuilt 3 slivers. In one, a figure in a dark overgarment crossed the rear hall just out of the camera's optical axis, head slightly turned away. No face, just gait length, arm swing, and a set of squared shoulders. When compared to reference clips from prior family events, the anthropometrics, height range, stride-to-leg ratio, shoulder carriage, sat inside the wife's band. The rear service door added a shard where metal should have told the whole story. Along the inner edge of the decorative light, a microscopic glass flake had lodged itself in the weather strip, likely dislodged when a miscut duplicate key grazed the pane's corner during removal. Tool marks inside the keyway showed a telltale chatter, not from forced entry, but from a rough-edged blank. Motion logs bridged the gaps the video left. At 2047, the rear hallway PIR triggered twice within 8 seconds, then again at 2103. Those times lined up with the guest half-bath water spike and the later NAS storage dip. The house didn't know names. It knew sequencing. Textiles contributed a small, stubborn fact. From the drawer pull, a single blue-gray microfiber came up under vacuum. Microscopy matched weave and denier to a brand of nitrile-lined kitchen gloves stocked in the wife's residence, not the mansion. The distinction was narrow, same manufacturer line, different model code, and it survived the Defense Lab's replication attempts. The phone ecosystem added negative space. No guest credentials were issued that week. No new MAC addresses joined the Wi-Fi. The only device entering and exiting the mesh during the window was the smart lock itself, reporting brief admin pings around the clock change at 2114. Someone with knowledge had altered settings, then tried to unwind the timestamp. Outside, a dark corridor existed where it shouldn't. 2 street lamps behind the hedge were dead, creating a 30-foot pocket along the service path. Utility logs showed the outage began 3 days earlier. A work order was opened from the wife's neighborhood account portal, an oddity only because she had never reported issues on that street before. The utility confirmed the ticket. The repair was scheduled for the morning after the homicide. Family devices drifted into focus next. The son's forensic image revealed a 00 login to the father's laptop under a guest profile the night before the murders. No documents were accessed, only the camera software dashboard opened and closed, leaving a config file with a new default export directory. It looked like a test run to see what the system could and could not see. The daughter's chat archive was mostly intact until it wasn't. Cloud Recovery pulled a deleted block. The mother advising, answer only what's asked and no specifics by text in the week leading up to the trip. Not instructions to commit a crime, instructions to control a conversation. Awareness, not necessarily complicity. Enough to change how detectives read their timelines. Back in the kitchen, chemical mapping of the sink basin found a band of diluted hemoglobin along the right-hand slope, weak but present, beneath a layer of citrus oil and dish soap. The pattern sat outside the usual wash zone for plates and cutlery. It matched a quick rinse of a small blade angled under running water. None of this, taken alone, was decisive. Together it moved the center of gravity. A drawer touched before and retouched with gloves. A lock worked by a key that was almost right. A camera that someone tried to make forget, and a house that remembered anyway. Children who did not stage a crime, but who circled its perimeter in the days before. The business partner's motive had numbers. The home's evidence had sequence. And sequence is what cases use when words won't hold. Interviews came in rounds. The first was posture. She denied knowing the American address beyond occasional business use, denied proximity that night, denied any change to access codes. Her answers were short, precise, rehearsed. Round 2 introduced time. Detectives walked her through the week, then the day, then the hour. They laid receipts next to gate logs, phone settings next to motion sensors. The shape of the evening appeared on paper. Food plated, lights cued, phones quiet. She asked for water. She stopped correcting minor points. By the third session, chronology did the work emotions could not. She conceded familiarity with the property, then admitted to the duplicate key. From there, the rest followed. She described the route from a public road to the service walk, the code sequence on the pad, the gloves, the scarf over her hair, and the plan to leave as little behind as possible. When asked why, she said what people in her position often say. She feared losing her family, her standing, and the version of her life the marriage preserved. Her statement set the scaffold. The house supplied the measurements. The reconstruction settled into minutes. 1932. Dinner delivered. The caterer plated 2 entrees and a dessert, left the receipt on the console, and exited before 1940. The house shifted into its evening scene on schedule. 2010. Last active use on her phone in the city. Foreground app activity ceased. The device continued handshaking with cell towers until it reached a coverage pocket near the park. 2028. Her car near the park. Cash taxi from there. ALP caught her plate on a side street. She left the car, turned off location services, and paid cash for a short ride that dropped her half a block from the service path. No ride record. Just a silhouette drifting across a dark hedgerow pocket the utility had left unlit. 2042 to 2151. The camera gap. She entered through the rear, used the duplicate key, and disarmed with the subcode she had added earlier that day. In the admin panel, she initiated a manual purge on interior cameras, targeting the hallway and living area. The NAS logged the storage drop and soft reboot at 2153. Motion sensors still recorded her pass-throughs. 24/7. Contact at the rear door. Tool marks and a tiny glass flake at the light confirmed a rough key removal, consistent with her description of pulling too fast when I heard a sound. The porch mic captured nothing. The pool pump had not yet cycled. 2050, 2102, kitchen, approach, and selection of the knife. She moved along the rear hall, entered the kitchen, and pulled the steak knife from the block. Her glove left a silicone detergent smear on the underside of the drawer lip when she steadied herself, later matched to product stocked in her home. The victims were in the living room with music low and the pool lights reflecting on the glass. 2103. Water spike in the guest half bath. After the assault, 3 targeted thrusts to the man's torso, 1 to the woman's neck. She rinsed the blade under running water, angling it to avoid backsplash. A weak hemoglobin band later mapped to the right basin slope beneath citrus oil and soap. She returned the knife to the drying rack, re-wiped surfaces, and moved to the office. 2108-2114. Clock manipulation. At the smart home hub, she advanced the time by 1 hour, then, realizing the scene lights now misaligned, rolled it back 90 seconds later. The logs kept both actions. The intent was simple: make it look like life continued later than it did. 2111. The call to set discovery. From a prepaid handset, she called the housekeeper and asked her to come earlier than usual the next morning. 14 seconds. Blocked ID. Familiar cadence, unfamiliar phrasing. The goal was not to check on the victims. It was to control when the scene would be found. 2115, 2122. Exit. She wiped the pad, backed out along the same route, and left on foot through the shadow corridor behind the hedge. The pool pump cycled at 2130, masking residual sounds in the yard. She reached the main road and took another cash taxi to her parked car. Her account aligned with data points investigators already had, but could not force into a single line without her words. The duplicate key explained the non-destructive entry. The glove chemistry explained the drawer smear and the absence of clean latent prints. The scarf and garment matched the recovered silhouettes in the partial video frames. The admin panel edits matched the time shift and the credential changes recorded that afternoon. The weapon choice mattered too. She did not bring a knife. She used the small stake blade from the house set, consistent with premeditation on access and concealment, not on importing an external weapon. The strikes were few and aimed, consistent with proximity and a short timeline rather than rage. Investigators pressure tested the statement against external cameras and neighborhood ALPRs. No vehicle bearing her plate entered the gate. The rideshare shadow at 2031 and her phone's drop-off in telemetry at 2011 fit the walk-in approach. The guest bathwater spike at 2103 sat inside the motion sensor pings and the later storage dip. The housekeeper's call at 2111 matched phone records from the prepaid handset recovered in a park bin 3 days later, IMEI linkable to a device purchased with cash near her residence. What the confession did not do was broaden culpability beyond her. The son's late-night guest login on his father's laptop the night before still looked like reconnaissance, not direct assistance. The daughter's deleted chat block still read as media discipline, not planning. Awareness lingered at the edges. Participation did not cross any admissible line. Her motives stayed narrow. She did not cite inheritance law or deal structures. She said she could not face the loss of status, the scandal, and the reordering of family hierarchy that the pregnancy implied. In court, those words would eventually be challenged. In the interview room, laid next to clocks, sensors, and receipts, they were simply part of the map. The plan, erase the evening, shift the time, set discovery, wasn't unsophisticated. It just collided with a house that recorded in redundancies and a neighborhood wired to remember passing plates and silhouettes. Where she tried to create a later life on tape, the devices documented an earlier end. The reconstruction didn't dramatize, it synchronized, and once synchronized, it held. On the record, the case is coherent. The physical traces and the digital sequence reinforce the confession. The timeline closes. The jury's work is visible in the minutes. 30 years is a number that satisfies statute. It does not explain anything. It cannot return 2 lives, or the one that never began. Sentences measure harm in years because that is what codes allow. Years are blunt. The term is excessive. Not because she is innocent, she isn't, but because the system answered a complex failure with maximum arithmetic. Responsibility ran wider than one night. Distance that calcified into routine. A marriage governed by optics. A family that functioned by procedure instead of conversation. None of that excuses a knife. It does change what resolution should mean. The court rewarded certainty. It punished manipulation of the scene and the attempt to bend time. That logic holds. But it leaves the living with tasks no court can order. The children must relearn a history that won't match their memories. A community must stop treating privacy as a cure-all. Advisors and staff who saw patterns must admit that patterns can be warnings. The house never argued. It kept receipts, clocks, and light states. It preserved choices in the order they were made. We can read that order and still not understand the cause. Law is good at endings. It is weaker at origins. Justice here feels like a ledger balanced to the penny with a line item missing. Accountability was delivered, prevention was not addressed. The next version of this story is already possible in any home optimized for silence. If you see patterns like these, sudden secrecy, isolation, rehearsed alibis, controlled access, speak to someone with authority to act. If you are in a situation that is turning toward harm, contact law enforcement or a local domestic violence resource. Documentation helps. Screenshots, dates, messages, but your safety comes first. A verdict closes a file. It doesn't heal a house. In this case, punishment was an outcome, not an answer.